Hey, how's it going? Well, I think I'm going to spend some time on this video answering a very simple question that has a very complicated and lengthy answer. And that question is, why am I off grid? I've been out here for going on 3 years, and the story's kind of long on how I ended up coming out here and why. But basically it comes down to two things. One is lifestyle, and two is money. I think the money part of the equation is probably becoming more relevant because the cost of living for everybody is going up, and everybody's feeling more of a pinch these days. I know I am. And being off grid gives me the opportunity to have a little bit more control over my finances and what I spend my money on just for surviving, for my property, for my power, for my water. I have some control that I wouldn't have if I was living in a traditional home, single family home that's in town, tied to the grid, where you got to pay for all your utilities and whatever. But so let me talk about the first part of it, lifestyle. And forgive me, it's kind of windy out here today. It's not horrible, but it's definitely blowing, so you're probably going to hear some wind noise as I walk around. And I'll probably have to take shelter from the wind. It's been, it's spring, it's getting towards spring, and it's kind of that transition period between winter and spring. Some days are cold. We just recently had snow. You can see down here it's still in the shaded areas and melting off. And it's kind of warm. It's supposed to warm up into the 50s today. Hopefully the wind dies down. But all right, so lifestyle. Before I moved out here, I was living in California, and I knew I would never buy property or even a home in California for two reasons. One is just ridiculously expensive. And yeah, just, I won't get into politics or whatever, but I wasn't a fan of how the state was being managed, and I just knew that I would not settle there. So what I decided to do, and I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago at this point, I was renting a place. I was actually renting a cabin in a little town called Crestline in California, kind of on the ridge that's on the same mountain ridge that Big Bear and Big Bear Lake and all that is down there, Southern California near Los Angeles. And I had moved up there a couple years before that to get out of the city. I've always been a nature lover. I love being outside. I'd get out every weekend, go hiking, camping, you name it. And I've always been a fan of just being out in nature. So that was part of the lifestyle part of it. But yeah, even though I was living in a cabin and it was nicer than being in the city, it was still ridiculous to pay the rent and knowing that I wouldn't ever buy anything. So I decided I bought an RV, which I still have, and it's modest to say the least. Again, forgive the wind. But yeah, so I got this 16-foot travel trailer, and you can see it behind me. And I put all my stuff in storage, and I moved into the RV. Initially, I was in California for about a month, stayed at some RV park or whatever. But my plan was to come up to Oregon because I love the Pacific Northwest. I lived in Seattle years before that for like 7 years, and fell in love with the mountains and the green and the rainforest and just all of it. It's just the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest. I love it. And I knew that Oregon generally was where I wanted to be. Got some friends in Portland, had considered moving to Portland, but I decided against that just based on the fact that it rains so much there. And I settled on the Bend area in Central Oregon for a couple reasons. Bend is kind of a mecca for outdoorsy activities. You got the Scissors Mountains, which is excellent for, well, anything, snowboarding, skiing, snowmobiling, hiking. It's just, they're epic. Mount Bachelor is obviously one of the most popular ski resorts in this area. And I'd spent some time in Bend. When I lived in Seattle, I would come down to Bend and I'd go snowboarding at Mount Bachelor. And, I brought I moved all my stuff up here in kind of two waves. I hauled up all my stuff from storage in a U-Haul trailer with my truck, put it in storage in Redmond, which is just north of Bend. And then I moved my RV up here after I had kind of scouted out a place to park it. So I did that, and I lived in my RV for about 3 years. And at first it was fine. There's definitely challenges with living in an RV. It's cheaper. That's a pro. But some of the cons are it can be pretty lonely. If you're claustrophobic, I don't recommend it. Obviously in an RV park, you got people right next to you. My neighbors were generally fine, but anyway, it was not going to be a long-term thing. Some people move into RV parks and never leave. And there were a lot of people in this RV park that I was at where that was the case. Even one of my neighbors, actually, they'd been there forever, and her husband died in the RV. And I was just like, dude, that's not going to be me. But anyway, after 3 years, I'd been looking, and the whole point of me moving up here in the RV was to find a property that I could buy, land, whatever. But everything was just so ridiculously way out of my price range. 3 years was long, and I was getting pretty restless. And I wouldn't say that I almost gave up, but I was getting pretty discouraged. And I had a good realtor. She knew exactly what I wanted. And this place that I live at now popped up, and I jumped on it. I mean, I came out here quickly, looked at it, and made an offer like the same day. Now this ties into the money part of it. So there's a couple of factors and I won't get into all of the, things you got to consider if you're going to be off grid, but, you could, there's kind of three basic ways, right? You could just buy raw land, move your RV on it, and just live like you're camping, right? And there are actually people out here where I live in Juniper Acres that do that, and quote unquote illegally, because they really shouldn't be doing that for an extended period of time, but they do. The other way is to buy like a single family home permitted, but you're not tied to utilities. You don't have, water service or power service. And that's my situation. And that's what I was looking for. I didn't really have the time or the resources to just buy a piece of raw land and develop it and build a home and all that. That's incredibly time intensive and budget intensive. And I just wasn't interested in doing that. And then, like the third way is to kind of find a property that is just like off-grid ready, has everything you need. You don't have to put any money into it and no investment, and you're set. That was not my situation. The property that I bought was in decent shape, but I bought it as is, and there were a lot of things that I agreed to fix myself, and knew that I would have to spend money on to get it up to, the condition that it is now, where my power is reliable and my water and all that. So But part of the give and take of that is when you buy a property like I bought, that's kind of as is and is a fixer upper for the most part. You know, there's going to be some investment, but you get it cheaper for the most part. I got to okay, just full transparency. I bought my property 10 acres off grid with a single family home, and it's not massive. It's only 1,000 square feet. Basically, I have a living room, a bedroom, a bathroom. And I do have a shop, but that's not part of the square footage. And I do have a greenhouse. So my 1,000-foot square home on off-grid property, 10 acres, about an hour east of Bend, I bought for $235,000, which puts me in a good spot because I could afford the mortgage and still save money to do the things that needed to be done to fix it up. So it was a perfect fit. I jumped on it, and it's been great for the most part. There's challenges, obviously, living off grid, and that's a whole nother video. But so the money part of the equation for me was, okay, I could afford it, and it's something that was sustainable for me to do. So, but yeah, before I actually seriously considered going off grid, like buying an off grid property, even though I'm an outdoorsy guy and I love camping and all that, I was actually looking at regular single family homes in town in Redmond and Bend, and I wasn't even willing to look in California, but it's just way out of my even just possibility of budget. I mean, I don't even understand how people do it, and I understand the frustration out there with the price of everything going up, and homes is just ridiculous. I mean, 3 years ago, it hasn't gotten any better. It's gotten worse. In California, it's like $600,000 or $700,000 for a single family home on nothing, like maybe an eighth of an acre or quarter acre, and your neighbors are on top of you. Like, F that. But here in Central Oregon, it's a little bit better. Things are a bit more spread out. But in town, it's kind of the same deal. You're on quarter acre plots for the most part. And even in town, like in Redmond's a little bit cheaper than Bend. It's like $450,000 to $500,000 for a single family home. In Bend, it's like higher than that, and it can be up to $600,000, and that's just for a 3-bedroom. Like I said, nothing special. No land. So, and I wasn't willing to take on a $500,000 mortgage for that. I know that I would have been miserable. So that's why I bought the place that I bought. It was within my budget, and it fit the lifestyle that I want to live. So for the lifestyle part of it, I really love the peace and the quiet out here. I've always been a hands-on guy. I was a contractor at one point. I know how to fix everything. And it's absolutely mandatory that you have a skill set to live off grid to do that thing. Whether you want to specialize in farming or whatever, man, you got to be able to work with your hands and do that. There's a lot of people that move out here in this neighborhood, this off-grid community called Juniper Acres, and they should not be out here. Like, I know it's cheaper. You can generally buy just raw land out here for like 50 or 60 grand for 10 acres. But it's not zoned. That, like, if you buy raw land like that, you can't build on it legally because you have to get a conditional use permit. Thankfully, I made sure that all that was legal for me. I bought this property. I made sure I had my CUP for short, conditional use permit, and my home and everything is permitted. But it's rare. They don't even issue those anymore out here. But people still move out here and buy land and move RVs onto land and try to make it work. And it's because it's a cheaper way to go, And a lot of people that, like one of my neighbors east of me, older lady, I think lives off Social Security, and she's a perfect example of somebody that should not be out here. She always needs help, Like last week, she got her truck stuck, and it's still stuck because it's been so muddy. And if she didn't have people like me to help her, I don't know what she'd do, you know? And her health's not great. And there's a lot of people out here that are like that. It's kind of sad. But even though I'm, you know, I can afford what I have and it makes sense for me financially, it's still stressful, to be blunt. I mean, like I said, I bought this place as is. Things that I knew that I had to fix. The first thing was painting the house. The house had never been painted since the original owner built it. The paint was literally peeling off the house. It was actually a condition of me getting my mortgage with the VA, because I used to be in the Air Force, so I qualified for a VA loan. They would not give me that loan until I painted the house. So I had to work with the previous owner to come out here on the weekends and paint the house before I could even close the deal. So that was interesting. But yeah, that was the first thing I had to do. And then the water cistern, literally the first Thanksgiving I was out here, the water pipe broke, and apparently it had been breaking a lot. I had to fix that and make that more reliable. The power has been a big issue out here. I finally got that reliable. But yeah, because I'm off grid, I've got solar, I've got a generator backup, and the original generator, I'll walk out here. It's still pretty windy, but the original generator that came with the house was a refurbished unit, a refurbished Kohler 8.5 kilowatt generator that barely got me through the first winter. I mean, I was praying for that thing to start some nights. And this little yellow unit here still runs, but it doesn't run, it actually doesn't work properly anymore. I had to, that was the first major expense, was buying that new 14 kilowatt generator. So I bought that and put that in myself and wired up to my solar and everything in the solar shed. And that, that generator, just the generator, was like $4,000. All the electrical and everything, I want to say it was probably $5 or $6 grand by the time I was done. And then as part of getting that new generator running, I had to get my propane systems up to speed, because the propane tank that was out here when I bought it, nobody would service it. It was just, apparently it was leaking. It was, yeah. So I had to get a new propane tank, and I had to put in new propane line to the new generator that I put in. I had to replace the propane line to my house. That project was probably close to $4 or $5 grand as well. And I got all that permitted too. And then, obviously I got the house painted. The other major project was the power, replacing the battery bank, which I talked about at length in other videos. But that actually, like I said, I've been out here almost 3 years. I have a budget, and I had to wait until this past summer to actually get this done, but I finally did it. And I replaced my lead acid batteries that were completely shot, and put in this battery rack cabinet here with the lithium iron phosphate batteries. So that's been great. My temporary workaround when the batteries were failing was the Delta Pros, which I had talked about before. I think it was the second winter that I was out here. The lead acid batteries were basically not holding a charge anymore, and I needed something to get me through winter. So I bought those Delta Pros, wired those in with a smart home panel, and it got me through winter. But now, since I replaced my lead acid batteries with the server rack battery, I'm using the Delta Pros as kind of my backup to the backup. So if for whatever reason, if my inverter and my server rack batteries if there's an issue, if they cut off, like I've had the inverter cut off a couple times and it's old, that's the next big expense, is replacing the inverter. Yeah, I'm gonna have to, if that goes out, I've got the EcoFlow to still provide power if that goes down, but I'll have to replace that, and that's another expense. So it's a constant thing being off grid. You gotta, you're gonna spend the money that you maybe would have spent on a power bill every month to the utility. You're spending on, whether it's saving money or spending money on keeping your off-grid system going. At some point, I'm going to want to upgrade my solar panels. I'm going to upgrade my batteries. I'm going to upgrade my inverter. And just, if I were to completely upgrade it all now, which I don't need to, I'm going to wait until the inverter fails. But if I were to just spend that money, that's 20 or 30 grand. So a lot of people think that being off grid is cheaper than, buying a home. But I think it just depends on your budget. I think generally that's true, but it's not like you move off grid and you don't ever spend money again on power. You definitely have to spend money to maintain your off grid system. Anyway, that was kind of a long-winded thing, but basically, the financial side of it, like I said, the reason I'm off grid is because ultimately, for me, it will be cheaper over time to have that kind of power or that control over my own power and being able to have money to spend on the power that I need, instead of sending it to a utility company and have no control over utility rates, which keep going up, right? So anyway, so I hope that answers the question why I'm off grid. For me, it made sense financially. And then 2, it's the lifestyle that I want. I feel more connected to the land. I generally, where I'm at, it's a whole off-grid community. Nobody out here is connected to any utilities. Again, we're about an hour east of Bend, about 45 minutes south of Prineville. And there's no utilities out here. I don't think there ever will be. It's just too far off the grid. So I'm surrounded generally by ranches and BLM land. I've got one neighbor east of me, the older lady. She's great. I have another neighbor north of me. He's interesting, but he's a good guy too. I would love to buy some of the lots that are west and south of me that are vacant, so that I can expand my 10 acres to maybe 40 acres or 60 acres at some point. But yeah, like it's in line with like how I want to live and what I want to do in the future. But again, like I mentioned before, there are challenges. It's a lot of work to maintain just your way of life when you're off grid, and the projects are endless. I still have a long list of things I want to do, including that tower, which I keep saying I'm going to talk about that tower, but that's another video. I do want to put up that tower for a wind turbine, but it's a big cost, and I don't know if I want to spend that money this year. So I'll talk about that later, but yeah, that tower there. So anyway, all right, I hope that answers the question. If you have any specific questions, just post a comment. I mean, I'm happy to answer anybody's questions about off-grid living. Yeah, maybe another video I'll talk about some of the challenges, and there's a lot. One of them being just the isolation part of it. I've always kind of been, like I wouldn't say a loner, but I actually am comfortable, being alone. A lot of people aren't. But even though I generally find peace in that, there's times where I'm just like, I want to be around people, and I'll go into Bend just to be around people. I mean, I do have a girlfriend. That's a whole nother story. She's in Redmond. She comes out here on the weekends. we make it work, but I don't think that she'll ever live out here. That's another video. So, all right. Thanks. Sorry again that this was so long, but again, it was a complicated answer. So, thanks for watching.